Well, we've got a bit of a treat on the podcast today because we're joined by Paul Holbrook. Now, 18 months ago, I was due to get in a room and record a face-to-face podcast with Paul Holbrook. And we all know what happened. The world went on lockdown. And so we never got around to it. And so glad to have re-engaged with him today to get this podcast down for you, because Paul is the founder of the Diary Detox. He's a published author, and he's ultimately got this mission to go and make people's working lives better. And he's doing a pretty good job of it. We talk a lot about his executive career in financial services and how he ended up transitioning to his own business ownership. But we also get super tactical about things like wellness, about productivity, and about how you can become the leader that your team need and get to the point whereby your team trust you and there's space without compromising your work-life blend or the things that are important to you outside of work. So it's an incredibly fascinating conversation. It gets quite emotional at various points with Paul when he's talking about his mission and the impact of his work. So get your pens and pencils ready, because this is one that you definitely don't want to miss. So without further ado, here comes Paul Holbrook, and let's get into it.
You're listening to the Career Jump Podcast. Insights, interviews, and success stories to inspire and give you the edge when you make your next career jump. Hosted by your career concierge, Andrew MacAskill.
Hello, welcome back to the Executive Career Jump Podcast. I'm your host and career concierge, Andrew MacAskill. Very excited today to have Paul Holbrook with us from Diary Detox, who's a chap I know well and has got some very, very interesting perspectives on the new world of work and productivity and wellness and a bunch of different things. So just thanks so much for freeing up some time, Paul. It's great to reconnect.
And with you as well. I think we've had this planned in for a while before COVID, and finally, having seen you on the telly, now is the time to do it.
Now's the time to do it. Yeah, we were due to meet face to face to record this some 18 months ago. So well overdue, but thanks for re-engaging. So just for those who are listening who perhaps don't know too much about your work or your story, tell us a bit about the Paul career journey and the type of stuff you get involved with today.
Well, I had my own little career jump. I spent 20 years in the City of London. I always have to say I was not a banker. That was not my fault. I was actually a technologist. 20 years ago, I started off, my degree was in mathematics, so I was a coder. I would spend my days writing code. And after about 2 years, I realized I was more interested in how people worked than I was in how computers worked. And that naturally took me up the management track within the banking world. At the end of my, what I would call first career, my full-time career, I was an MD for an investment bank in London. I was running change in the UK, and I ran a division of about 350 people. There'd always been a bit of a frustration, I say bit, a lot of a frustration with what I would say the quality of management in that space. And it's not unique to banking, it's pretty much everywhere. I just didn't feel that managers really cared about their people. I later found out that that's actually not the point. It's not they don't care, it's that we've just grown up kind of learning management from the people before us and not really questioning what the fundamentals of being a manager are. So about 4.5 years ago, my lovely wife turned around to me and said, well, why don't I look after us? You go start a business, I'll take care of us for a while and let's see where we get to. I retrained as a coach, but I'm not a coach. Having qualified as a coach and as I started to market myself, the biggest phrase that I heard from people when I tried to, get engaged with them and start working with them was, I'm sorry, but I just don't have enough time. And for me, that was extremely frustrating, but also quite confusing, because I thought, well, if you're a leader, if you're the leader you think you are, how have you not got time to talk about self-improvement and leadership and those things? And so after a while, I thought to myself, well, back when I was running those big divisions and people said they didn't have time, there's this little technique that I would use with them to help them realize that actually they did have time if they really prioritized the right things. And so that's what I started doing, it almost as a door opener. And eventually it ended up turning into a product. I ended up thinking, well, actually, this is probably the most valuable thing people need right now. And it became what is now known as the Diary Detox, which is basically a method that helps managers give more time to building productivity and well-being, but also trust with their people. I've been doing it for about 4 years, 4.5 years. I've written a book, got an app, And I now work with bigger companies, having originally worked with smaller businesses, but now working with very large corporates, in fact. So that's my story up until now.
And was that an easy leap for you to make? Or how did you get on with the courage of leaving the corporate safety net behind?
I'd like to say that there was a huge amount of bravery involved there, and that I kind of thought, no, this is such a purpose. No, it wasn't. If I'm really honest, I'd had enough. I'd absolutely had enough of that space. I don't think I was unique, but I was certainly rare in that I came from a world that was expert based. Yeah, it's the same if you have technology, consulting, accounting, law. They're all businesses that are filled with experts, and we tend to promote experts in a field, but that does not by any means make you a good candidate for managing in those spaces. I think I was quite unusual, because when I became a manager, I saw my role as making it as simple as possible for my people to do theirs. Whereas many people in expert fields usually see promotion as, okay, I was an expert, I'm still an expert, and I'll manage a few people on the side. And it's that manage a few people on the side that is the real thing that used to drive me nuts. And so I got to the point, it built all the way through those 20 years to a point where I thought, I've so had enough of this, and I don't want to be part of this anymore. And I swore I was leaving the city forever and I would never go back to it. So I think the decision was made for me by my values. However, what's interesting is that now I am at the situation I'm at. I've realized that the destiny for me is to go back into that world, having now created what I've created, and help managers to see that actually all those things that you believe you don't need to do, or that you believe you do need to do, are not actually doing anything in line with looking after your people, building productivity, and more importantly, building trust. So no, it wasn't a hard leap to make, but it was an incredibly uncomfortable, and it has been a massively hard journey. I think if anybody had said to me 4 years ago it was going to be as hard as it has been, I may have thought twice about it. I don't think I'd have had much choice, but I'm so glad I did, because it was the right thing to do, and it's exactly the right space for me to be in right now.
Yeah. What have been some of the highs and lows of that journey then, building on that?
I think probably the biggest low of it is that, it was completely clear to me at the very beginning, this was a value-driven move. I was doing this because I believed in it, and I was so incredibly frustrated having seen so many colleagues' lives destroyed in some respects because they were doing something they hated. They were getting on a train in the morning to a job they disliked. And towards the end, I was getting to work at 9 a.m, and I was counting the minutes until 5 o'clock came, and I had an excuse to leave. So I think the biggest low for me is when you do something because you fundamentally believe it, and then because it's a completely different kettle of fish, working for somebody else and running your own business. You have to do all the marketing, all of the sales, and actually those are probably the biggest things you have to do. Doing the job is easy, and it's that much of what you need to do. But as you do that marketing, those sales, if you don't get that message right, and it is incredibly difficult to get that message right to start with, you get a lot of pushback. And what that feels like, or what it felt like to me as a business owner, was when I was trying to sell this vision of what I wanted, and people were saying, but I don't have time for that. It's almost like saying, I don't care about your values. Your values mean nothing to me. I've got more important things to do. I got goosebumps just saying that just then. It felt really hard. And it was my wife one day when she said, I said, I'm just getting so fed up with people telling me they haven't got time to talk about this stuff. This is the stuff that is gonna skyrocket them. And she said, but Paul, that's the point. If these are the people that need you, they're the ones who are saying, I don't have time. And I almost in that moment when she said that, I thought, oh yeah, they are the ones that need me, and they're the ones you really need to keep talking to. So that was a really, really hard period to go through. And it was a really hard realization to come to, that you are going to get pushed back by the very people who need you most. And that is going to feel horrible. So that's that. I think in terms of the high points, I think It's always the same. I mean, whenever you do something like a diary detox, whenever I do that with somebody, especially somebody very senior, and there was one particular CEO who I did a diary detox with, and they said two things after it, which really, they're at the core of me. And again, I've got goosebumps saying that then. One was that they said, oh my goodness, I just didn't realize that this was going to be that. I didn't realize you were going to do this. I thought you were going to just come in, look at my diary, have a look at all this stuff and tell me all the stuff I didn't need to do. And of course, that would never work. It's about showing them a side of themselves they've never seen before. And when they look at their diary and go, but that's not what I thought I was doing. How can I change that? It's like, they get it. They're getting it. That's always a really, really big moment for me. But the other one was that one day, one CEO turned around to me and said, thank you. You've just given me permission to be the CEO of my business. I'm getting a bit tearful of this. And that is incredible. It's an incredible moment and it's not because of what it's done for them. It's because I know that if they do all the things that they need to do as a CEO, I know how they're going to act in the future towards their people, because it's their people who need them to act as that CEO. It's not them. Yeah, they'll get some benefit and they'll get some extra time and they'll stop wasting their times on things they don't need to do. But it's the way that's going to change how they act towards their people. And that was what was at the core of this whole journey. It was about removing toxic management and creating a world of better led people. That's what this was all about.
Amazing, isn't it? And the reverberating impact of all of that is tremendous. And clearly, based on how you're feeling talking about it, the authenticity you bring to that topic has always stood out for me. It clearly is something you care very, very deeply about, which I think is awesome. Let's get a bit tactical then. Tell us a little bit about the Diary Detox methodology and the ethos, and a bit more about what you share in the book and what you share with people when you first meet them. Talk to us about it.
Okay, so the Diary Detox, it's really interesting because the Diary Detox, essentially, it started off as two steps. It started off as a method. And when I was doing it with people who used to work for me, and I didn't know it was a Diary Detox then, it was just how I think about time. You know, people would say to me, well, I haven't got time to do all these things you're asking me to do. And the first thing I would always think in my head was, but I gave you your job and I know what your job is. And I know it shouldn't take as long as it's taking. So what is it that you're doing that makes you believe you have no time? And so for me, when I was doing it individually with people who used to work for me, I would go, okay, so just tell me what you're spending your time doing in an average week. The minimum should be like 5% chunks. Just tell me. And there was one person who I did it with, and they said, well, okay, I spend 5% of my time on this stuff and 10% on this stuff, and then about 40% on this stuff. And it was like, whoa, 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 what's that? Because I knew it wasn't something they should be doing. And it wasn't about saying that isn't something you should be doing. It was about getting them to see that it isn't something they should be doing. And I said, so what is that? And they say, oh, well, it's doing this little project thing. And I say, and that's your role? And they go, yeah. And I go, you sure? And they go, well, it's not, but it's this other person's role, but they're not doing it, so I have to do it. It was like, rewind. And we do convince ourselves that a lot of the stuff that we are doing is something that we have to do. So one of the first parts of what ended up being the Diary Detox was getting people to see for themselves not what they're doing, but the value they're getting from what they're doing. And so part of Diary Detox is about creating a mirror, and it's using your own diary and using color in your own diary to see the value you're getting from everything that you fill your diary with every day. And originally it started off with 3 colors, then it went to 4, then it went to 5. And in this current incarnation, it's 5. So everything you see in your diary will come into one of 5 colors. The first one, green. I'm wearing that right now. And green is the essence of leading. And leading, for me, is one of 3 things. It's either thinking about how you're going to make things, the world, someone better. It's communicating, so talking to people or talking to a person about how you're going to make the world or them better. And then lastly, you've only got thoughts and words. You've actually got to have some action. The last one is called improving. And that's actually putting it into action. And that could be improving a business. It could be improving yourself via training or leadership, coaching or mentoring, or it can be training somebody else to become better. Those are the three real essence of leading. Then you've got the amber behavior. And amber behavior is the essence of managing. And managing is about making sure that things don't go backwards. It's risk management. And this is about checking, monitoring, to see that things and people are in the right space, are well, are doing the right things. And in some cases, it's about directing, telling somebody, if it's urgent, giving them instruction as to how they should do things. Those are the two essences of being a supervisor, managing. So then you've got the red stuff, and the red stuff is doing. That's transactional stuff. That's productivity. That's delivering, that's creating, that's administration, it's email. Those are the things that ultimately earn money, but it's the green stuff that makes that earning more valuable. So you've got the red stuff, which is doing. Then we've got something called floating, and floating is brown. And the reason floating is brown, I'm sure you could probably, you're obviously filling in the gaps for me because I can see you smiling, is waste, because brown things that float are waste. And that's there a lot more than you would think. And it's about not adding value, or it's about when you're not sure what value you're adding. Because if you're not sure, you're probably not adding any. And then finally, and this was the most recent one to come up, there was living. And this is an incredibly important part. We're hearing a lot about well-being, but living is about recharge. It's about looking after your physical, mental, spiritual, emotional well-being. And it is so underdone and under-focused on and under-prioritized in our lives that I think it's important that people see how little of their time, even though it's required, is actually spent looking after ourselves. Because, in the plane, when the thing comes down from the ceiling, the bars, you're told, put your own on first. It's not selfish, it's just prudent, because if you're not in the best place, you can't help anybody else. So part of it is about colors and giving people a way of categorizing their diary and seeing how much of a leader manager they are. The second part is about focus. It's about being incredibly pinpoint accurate about what it is you are there to achieve. What do you need to get done, either in a productivity way or in a leadership or management way? And so we create, you've got outcomes, you've got objectives, you've got job descriptions. I like to focus on targets. And in a world where we're really asking people to stop focusing on time spent at desk and start focusing on what you achieve, targets are the equivalent of what you achieve. And if you start to have those in your mind, first and foremost, when you plan your time out, you become incredibly focused on where you spend your time. I actually didn't think that was going to be the most important part of the Diary Detox, but it actually has turned out to be. It's amazing how few people realize what they're there to achieve, crazily. Then the third part is something I call the Diary Detox, the weekly Diary Detox. And that is basically a 30-minute task every week, maybe on a Friday morning, where you basically go back and reflect on what you've done over the past week in terms of the colors, etc. But you also look forward to your coming week, and you think about your targets and you plan your time consciously to achieve those things. It's amazing how little of our time in our diaries is consciously planned to do our job. It's usually only used to put in meetings that people have booked with us and meetings we've booked with other people. Doing your job, God forbid that would go into your diary. But the problem is, if you don't plan it in, it doesn't get done. And even more so, if you don't plan in your blue time, your living, that very rarely happens as well. And then lastly, it's about interruptions. It's about, okay, we've got this great plan about what I'm going to do next week, but weeks never go to plan. What about when somebody comes and taps me on the shoulder, or my boss comes and tries to pull me away from what I was supposed to be doing? And so there's something called the Spot Diary Detox, which is it's like doing the same 5 steps of the Diary Detox, but doing them in about 30 seconds. And it gets you to just stop and question, hang on, is that thing I'm being interrupted with more important than the thing I already had planned in? And if it is, then great, I'll rearrange. And if it isn't, I'm going to respectfully push away or help somebody else to see what I'm doing that I believe is more important. And that can just start a dialogue of, oh, then it isn't more important. But often we're just not having these conversations. So it's kind of giving people empirical data and evidence over what they're planning to do that allows them to have better conversations with those around them and above them.
I love it. It's bringing some clarity to that conversation and depersonalizing it as well. That's what's really coming through there for me.
Yeah, becoming objective about how you're spending your time is incredibly important. I mean, I sat down with a CIO of a very large city bank, not Citibank, bank in the city. And what was really fascinating, I did something called a discovery with him. It was a one-on-one thing then. It's now you can do it with large groups of people. But what was really interesting is that I asked them about a particular meeting that they were having with their boss twice a week, and they'd coloured it green, which should generally mean that it's leading, it's something that's going to make things better. And I challenged them. I kind of said, okay, so which of the 3 green behaviors is that meeting with that boss? Is it thinking, communicating, or improving? And when we kind of walk through the descriptions of those things, because there is a description, you don't just look at the word, you look at the description and that defines the word. And it was none of those things. And I went, okay, well, maybe it's amber. So we talked about monitoring and directing. Which of those is it? He went, no, it's neither of those. I went, okay, maybe it's the red one. So is it blah, 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 blah. And it was like, no, it's not that one. And by definition, once you've gone through all those, and it definitely wasn't living, it was floating. And I said, well, here's the litmus test. I said, if that meeting had got cancelled for whatever reason and had never occurred, what would you have lost through not having that meeting with your boss? And he said, nothing. And I said, well, there you have it. That is the textbook definition of floating, which is something that if it didn't happen, you'd lose nothing. It's adding no value. And this is the thing, I think so often we don't really consider what value it's adding. We're almost looking at the person who's calling us to a meeting, and we are intrinsically saying that must add value because my boss is inviting me. Your boss has no incentive to waste your time or his. Often, if you find something that you're going to be doing with your boss, you sit there and honestly believe in your core that that isn't adding any value. Your boss needs you to have a conversation with him about it, because it may be that it is adding value, but you just don't get it, which in itself is really important as a conversation. But on the other hand, it could be that it really isn't adding any value. And your boss needs to understand that so that they can either choose to make it valuable or just cancel it, because you've got better things to be doing than wasting your time. And that's what this is about. If anything, it's not about telling people what to do. It's about showing them what's really happening and giving you an insight that you've probably never had. It's like holding up a mirror in your face and showing you what's really going on.
Confronting the brutal facts.
Yeah.
Which is a really, really important exercise, isn't it? Hey, everybody. Sorry to interrupt the podcast, but I wanted to tell you very quickly about how Executive Career Jump can help end your career misery. So when you hit our website, there's 3 different ways that our digital resources can help you. For a start, if you're looking to jump in to a new role, we've got the premier online job search course that you're going to find anywhere. There's a number of different memberships to help you understand what you want and how to go and get it in this current environment. So we're here to help you if you want a new career. We've also got a section if you want to jump up in your career. And so this is all about our online leadership hub, which is a platform full of content, includes 2 meetups per quarter and a whole thriving community of leaders trying to become the best leaders they can be. Go and check that out too. And the third area in our website and the other digital course that might help you is our business launcher course. So we've created the business launcher program that we wish we had when we were setting up on their own. So if you've decided to jump off of the employment stream and start up on your own, make sure you head over and check that out too. You can find all of these resources, a bunch of free content, links to previous podcasts and more at execcareerjump.com. That's execcareerjump.com. Now, back to the pod. One question I had, and this is probably a bit of personal coaching whilst we've got you on the podcast. Why not? I'll take the opportunity.
Always happy to help.
Exactly. Yep. That is productivity in my view. Get some personal coaching whilst you can.
And that's also a green behavior as well. So that's good.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So one conflict I guess I have, or consideration I'm always thinking about, is getting the right mix of consistency versus creativity, because I'm fully aware that, doing things consistently and having good habits and having structure and repeating the same tasks, which in our world from a sales and marketing point of view could be, personal branding online or recording brilliant podcasts like this or whatever it might be. Consistency of activity compounds over time to deliver great returns. But equally, creativity and variation light me up, give me energy, and I'm always going to lean more to that way from a personality point of view. I wonder within the colors, where does the mix of consistency versus creativity come in?
Depends on your role, and it depends on your level within an organization. So I think entrepreneurs and small business owners, I think I would put over to one side. There's just as much of an answer for them as there is for anybody else. But if you look at within a bigger organization, so if you have a more structured organization, you're a C-suite member and so on, or senior manager or junior manager, or even a non-manager, there's always a recommended, suggested mix of those colors that you would expect people to have. And of course, the more you go up the hierarchy, the less red you have to do, the less hands-on delivery, and the more managing, amber, or the more leading you have to do, green. And indeed, at the highest level, and this is actually fascinating, when I do a discovery with a large organization, you would normally hope that a C-level, MD level individual within a business would be spending around about 80% of their time on the green stuff. Vision, strategy, planning, thinking about obstacles, brainstorming, anything like that. And only about 20% of their time should be spent on managing, which is checking to make sure that that vision that they're looking for is being achieved, or that results are being achieved. Very little doing should be visible in a very, very senior person's role. Whereas at the lower end, the non-manager, you'd expect about 70% of their time to be on red, delivery, productive. About 20% of their time should be on managing, but managing themselves, managing the relationship with their clients and their peers. And there's still 10% of leading, and it's usually leading yourself, self-development, and also maybe succession planning for when you step up. So there is a mix. And then in between, there are different percentages. For a smaller business owner, it's more difficult because there are fewer people to do the doing. You kind of have to really hold it in a balance. So for me, I don't think there is a hard and fast rule. However, what I would say is that remember that productivity, the red stuff, is that's when you're earning money. And of course, as a small business owner, you have to earn money. But the green stuff, well, the amber stuff is the stuff that makes sure that money gets earned. So you're checking in with clients. Are you happy? Is everything working for you? Is anything I can be doing differently? That's the kind of amber side. But the green stuff is, what can I be doing next? What's this other product I could be building as a spin-off to this that I know is going to help other people? What mentoring can I be getting? What can I be creating that's going to change what this looks like in the future? Those have to be all put in usually to 1 or 2 or even 3 or 4 people's time. So for me, my personal mix that I aim for is I aim for about 50% of my time is red, productive delivery. About 10% of my time managing, checking in with clients, checking in with that things are going as they should be. And about 40% of my time, so 2 days a week, is spent on creative stuff. And the biggest part of that green chunk is the first of the ones I mentioned, which was thinking. You know, it's almost like at senior levels, we think that sitting down and thinking about our business, thinking about where it's going, we think it's a waste of time. And that's one of the ones people will say, that's brown, right? You go, no. That's where the creativity comes. So there's no hard and fast answer for a small business owner, but that's what I aim for. 40 green, about 10% of my time amber, and about 50% red. That can change from week to week, as in what I end up actually doing. And that's okay, as long as you understand why it's changing. But generally, I use that as the litmus test. If it starts to go away from those percentages for a long period of time, I start to question what's going on. And that's what this is all about, is just showing you what's happening so that you get to question why and maybe have a conversation or change your thoughts.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, no, really, really good. And my approach is I'm bringing other people and trying to get as much into the green zone as possible. So that's music to my ears. That's where I want to play. That's what lights me up. But as you said,
if I can add something to that, it's really interesting. I actually had a small business owner who, interestingly, they owned the business. And as we were talking, I was doing the Diary Detox with them. And as we went through it, they said, the thing is, I really like the doing. That's all I want to do. And I said, that's okay. It's okay to do that. I said, but all I'm really trying to get you to understand is that by no green and amber, you're running a risk that your business will stagnate. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that. I said, by all means, go and spend all your time doing the red stuff. but why don't you bring somebody in who can do the green and amber stuff for you? And it was a real kind of moment of, yeah, but I own the business. I have to do that. No, you don't. You don't have to do that at all. Anybody can do that. It's only to make sure that that stuff gets done. It doesn't matter if it's you that does it.
Well, that's actually a very important point in terms of careers and business ownership, because there's a distinct difference between shareholding and role.
Yeah.
We get the two confused. And I think, the most high profile example is Ben Francis at Gymshark, who's done amazing things over the last 5 or 6 years. And when the business got to 10 million, he hired a CEO in above him. And so he hired someone to run the organization, despite the fact he was the majority shareholder. And he did that based on aligning himself with the stuff that he knew what to do and what he was good at. And I thought that was such a refreshing approach. This idea that as businesses grow or as we get promoted, that we have to be the complete article or we have to be sat at the top of the pyramid, it's not the case.
This is why small businesses, when they grow, they hire a managing director. The managing director is somebody who is going to go, I mean, I'll be really honest with you. If you get to a certain level and you're having to mix all that green, amber, and red, then yeah, first of all, you try to offload as much of the red as you can. That's the stuff that you can teach people to do really easily. The green stuff has to be in line with the core of the values of the business and where I wanted this to go. That's why you generally, as the business owner, usually have to be the person that does the green stuff. But what's interesting is that when you bring in an MD, what you're really doing is you're offloading a lot of the amber stuff. You're basically offloading to the MD. They're the person that's going to check that things are happening the way they should be, with directing people as necessary. And sometimes they'll do some of the red stuff. Again, don't get convinced that you're the only person that has to do all of the colors. But here's a really interesting point. When you're junior, you usually spend a lot of your time, let's say a very good techie, you're spending a lot of your time on the red stuff. When we promote within organizations, we've fallen into this trap for many, many years of promoting really good technologists. Okay, so what tends to happen is you've got somebody who's predominantly red and we promote them. But what we don't do is we don't give them the sense of, so what is your role now? And this is why I think I kind of thrived in that space, because for me, the natural change in that role was that I was going to become less red and I was going to become more green and amber. Most experts, when they're promoted, don't get that. And it's not their fault. It's just how it is. That's what they love to do. That's why they're so good at it, because they love it. But what tends to happen is they take that red with them and they carry on doing the red, and then they do the green and amber as a little bit of a side task. Okay, now that's a real challenge. What I think we should be doing is we should be, as businesses, as organizational leaders, we should be showing those people that we promote what it is we expect of them in terms of the mix of colors. And I think, I remember being in a meeting once where we'd had a coach brought in. I was actually a contractor at the end of my what I would call my first career. And there was this one guy in there. We were all being coached. There was about 7 people in this management team. I was one of them. And one of the guys in the management team had always really struggled to do the things that he needed to do as a manager. And there was a moment during it, and this was actually one of the catalysts for me eventually leaving and starting going down the coaching route, was because it became clear to me that all the things that he didn't like doing were the things he was expected to do. And I said in this meeting, I said, does anybody mind if I just make an observation? And I just said, let's call him Jim. Jim, what are all the things that you like doing most? And he said, I like doing this and this and this. And I went, okay. And what are all the things that you dislike doing most? And he went, this, and this. And I said, is it just me, or are all the things you've just said you dislike doing the core of your current job? And you could hear this audible intake of breath where he said it. And 2 weeks later, he'd negotiated with his boss to stop his job, to get demoted, but still get paid the same amount of money. And he was happy and he was thriving. And I think we need to start being clear with people who we promote, what we're expecting of them, so that they have the choice to go, well, that doesn't sound like fun. That's not what I want to do. And at the moment, we didn't have a way of doing that. With Diary Detox, I hope now we do have a way of showing people what's expected of a manager and a leader, and hopefully getting them to see it before we ask them to make the leap. The career jump, as one would say.
As some might say, and hiring and promoting the right people. Definitely in sales, I've seen what you're talking about, whereby someone who's brilliant at sales ends up as head of sales, whereas actually the reason they were brilliant at sales is because they had a relentless individual focus on closing deals, not on nurturing people or culture. And that's fine. That's just who they are. But the promoting people based on competence of their role rather than based on competence in leadership is an error, isn't it?
Well, the problem is that we're promoting them based on their past competence in their role, not on the future competence of that role.
That's very true.
And if I'm honest, I don't think that organizations have been particularly clear about what that competence of role is. I mean, for me, there was a great story this weekend in the Sunday Times business section. I've become a massive fan of James Timpson, the guy that owns the Timpson chain of stores.
He's awesome.
Oh my goodness. And you know what? I've always kind of liked his stuff because he's got quite a human and no nonsense and quite simple approach. You know, in my book, I say it's simple, but it's not easy. And it is simple. A lot of this stuff is. And there's a word that he used in his article, which I love. And interestingly, that's the word he used. And I've wanted to say that in posts, but I've held back sometimes thinking, oh, people will look at that and go, that's so wishy-washy. But I really do believe this. I think the fundamental, day one, page one qualification that you should be looking for in any potential manager, and I sound really hippie now, is a love of people. You need to love people, because if you love people, and I don't mean, affectionately, I mean love the effect that you can have on making someone thrive. All those things we try to teach in leadership development courses will come naturally, because the people who love people do them naturally. I did it naturally. I was hell-bent on making sure that when somebody took on a role, I saw my job as teaching them to do it, allowing them to do it, making the environment in which they're doing it conducive to them doing it better. So few managers do that. A lot of the narrative is almost like, oh yeah, well, don't worry about it. Do some of the soft stuff. No, don't live some of the soft stuff. That's the most important stuff. So I think that, you could do a lot worse than to start to measure potential candidates on their fondness of others and 100%. Their desire to develop others.
And God, we could do a whole other podcast on that topic. But when I look back at my career, the advice I got early on was the exact opposite. Don't care too much about the people. Don't get too close to them. All of this stuff. You're too in tune with your team. Yeah, you're too invested in your team. Like, what are you doing, man? So totally with you. Right, I'm conscious of time. I want to get some quick fire in before we wrap, if that's all right. So any books or podcasts that have helped shape your thinking?
Oh, not mine. Okay, yeah. So one of my favorite books on the subject of management is Good to Great by a guy called Jim Collins.
Awesome.
That, to tell you the truth, I read that book actually relatively recent, about a year ago. That book, I think, is a masterclass in looking at the fundamentals, getting the right people on the bus, looking for the right people and not just assuming they're the person next to you already.
And it still holds up now. I read it about 10 years ago and it still holds up, as does Beyond Entrepreneurship, which is another Jim Collins one I recommend to anyone listening. They've just done a version 2.0 of that, which is fantastic. Great. Love that. What is the importance of trust in amongst all of this?
I'd say it's the most important thing, in my opinion. But here's the thing. I think I know this isn't very quick fire. I'm really sorry. I think the trust thing we get the wrong way round. I think there's a huge amount of narrative on LinkedIn and on other social media platforms at the moment that this is about managers developing trust in their people. No, it's the other way round. I think managers should be spending more time developing the trust of their people in them. If you do that, people will start talking to you. They will start telling you when things are going wrong. They will start telling you what they need. They will work for you. The most inspiring thing a manager can do today is start every one-to-one with the words, how are you doing? Instead of, what are you doing? Start doing that. You have already started to lead your people, because they will love you for it, because you cared about them.
Absolute gold. And what are you excited about at the moment?
Oh, blimey. What am I excited about? I'm excited about the fact that the last 4 years has been a real challenge in terms of figuring out what the narrative needs to be in order for me as a business to be able to resonate with the people who I'm hoping to help. I think I've now, after those 4 years, really started to get it, that I need to meet people where they are in their language and in their understanding. This is about developing leaders. This is about developing trust. And this is about developing productivity. But well-being is at the absolute core of this. For too long, we have lived in the gaps between work. We now need to start working in the gaps between life. Our well-being is the highest priority thing we need to be planning in right now for ourselves and for our people.
Amazing message. And finally, 3 things people can do to create a more productive culture.
First of all, I would say start to understand what you're doing. So really question the value you're getting from what you're doing. I'd say the second thing is throw away your to-do list. You don't need a to-do list. They're a waste of time. The only time you get to do things on your to-do list is when you have space in your diary. So here's a revolutionary idea. Why not put all the things on your to-do list in your diary? Then you will have planned to do them. So that's the other thing. And then the third thing is plan in your personal time, all the things that look after your physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional well-being. Plan those into your diary first and foremost before anything else. We have this thing called Parkinson's law that says that work will expand to fill the time available. If you plan in all of your personal time first, you will give yourself less time to work in. And when you do your work, you will be more focused because you'll realize I've only got an hour to do that instead of 2 hours. Therefore, guess what? It only takes an hour. So those are the 3 things I would say.
Amazing message. What a way to finish. Absolutely love that one, Paul. For people listening that, are maybe looking to do some work on their teams or themselves, what's the best way for someone to follow up or get in contact with you?
There's a few ways. I've written a book about it. And the book's called What Are You Doing? The Uncomfortable Truth About How You Spend Time at Work. So you could go onto Amazon, that book is there. You could go onto diarydetox.com. And there, I think the best first step for any organization is doing something, what I call a discovery. You can run it for up to 10,000 people at a time. You get to teach your people some new things about how they think about time. And also you get to ask them some questions and get more insight into what's really happening. So you could do that, and you can go look at that at diarydetox.com. Or you could just reach out on LinkedIn. I'm Paul Holbrook. I'm always happy to connect with people. And just like we did with you here, I'm always happy to give people advice. It is the first stepping stone towards creating a relationship, is just asking for a different perspective. We don't talk to each other enough about what's going on. And I think that's the first step. So those are the 3 ways. Well,
I genuinely think you're carrying a very, very important message. I love the work you're doing. I love the authenticity behind it as well. I know that's an overused word, but I really mean it in terms of you. It permeates in how you deliver your message. So thanks for all the work that you're doing to try and improve people's lives at work. That aligns very well with what we stand for as well. And I highly recommend anyone who's not following or in contact with Paul puts that right as soon as they've listened to this podcast. So thanks again for joining us. Cheers.
More than welcome. Thanks for talking.
You've been listening to the Career Jump podcast with Andrew MacAskill. For more resources and information, just head over to the Career Jump website at www.execcareerjump.com to supercharge your job search and start making moves. Let's get to work.